Welcome back to the Theology of Business podcast. I'm your host, Darren Shearer, author of The Marketplace Christian, a practical guide to using your spiritual gifts in business and marketing like Jesus, 25 strategies to change the world. And this is a show that helps marketplace Christians to partner with God in business, to transform the marketplace and make an impact in eternity. And I want to remind you before we get started today that the Faith at Work Summit is coming up in Dallas, Texas on October the 27th through the 29th. So if you haven't already purchased your ticket, definitely go ahead and do that as soon as possible because there are only about 20 seats left. At this conference, over 400 leaders from churches, businesses, and academia will gather to discuss the Faith at Work movement and just learn how to work together to extend Christ's transforming presence and help Christians find eternal purpose in the workplace. You can find out more information about this conference at fwsummit.org, or you can just contact me through theologyofbusiness.com or on social media, and I'll definitely help you get connected. Either way, I would love to connect with you at the event, so be sure to let me know if you're planning to come. Well, today we're going to be discussing the state of faith in film, and we're joined by Matthew Faraci. This is an episode I've been wanting to do for a while and finally found just the right person because if you're wanting to make an impact in the culture, I mean, doing it through media is by far one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful way. I mean, Americans are spending about 11 hours a day consuming some sort of media, and certainly film is a huge part of that. And so Matthew's working with a variety of organizations. He's basically helped to promote all of the major Christian films that have come out in recent years, not just Christian films, but films targeting that values audience. So we're talking about Unbroken, God's Not Dead, War Room, Heaven is for Real. He's the president of Inspire Buzz, which is an entertainment marketing firm solely focused on delivering the values audience. And prior to founding the company, worked successfully with more than a dozen companies in entertainment, corporate, public policy, and nonprofit spaces, designing highly customized strategies, fusing proven and cutting-edge tactics together to achieve big goals. And his work has been profiled in basically everywhere. I mean, all of the major news outlets, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and actually just recently, I want to hear a little bit about this. I think it was even just last week in the Washington Times, they did a special edition section on faith in film. And so it's just an honor to have him on the podcast. Welcome, Matthew.
Hey, well, thank you. It's actually my honor to be here.
Well, tell us a bit more about your personal business background and how God led you into the film industry.
Well, I am a recovering political strategist. And I spent most of my life in that world. And I think that, people are definitely called to that. So I don't mean to minimize that at all, but there are different, if your listeners are familiar with this sort of biblical concept of mantles, I've seen people's missions shift in different times in life, and certainly mine has. And what really sort of wrecked me was several years ago before he died, I heard Andrew Breitbart talk about politics being downstream from culture. And it was very clear to me when he spoke about that we really have lost the culture. And so I felt a definite calling to get into that particular area because, we at this point, trying to fix the country via elections is just kind of a Band-Aid. But, everybody complains, as an example, about how do we end up with this particular candidate or that particular candidate? And the answer is us, right? It's our lack of character. It's our lack of demanding people of integrity. It's a lack of wanting to look at the truth and making hard decisions about where we are as a country, right? I mean, everybody talks about we need this reform and that reform, and then somebody actually raises a tough decision and everybody jumps all over them. So the point is, our problem is us. And so I thought, well, particularly for younger people who are really the future of everything, I wanted to have an opportunity to impact the culture in a positive way. And so that was the shift. And at the same time, it was interesting because these films started to come out, and they started to come out in a way that, for a long time you had, well, The Passion came out, of course. And then after The Passion, everybody tried to figure out how to crack the nut. But the industry really didn't understand the audience. They still don't, by and large. And there were sort of fits and starts as to how to go after this audience, because not necessarily because there was some sort of moral change in Hollywood, but because there was just an understanding that clearly there's money to be made here. I mean, The Passion is still the number one independent film of all time in terms of box office gross. Wow. So folks tried to crack that nut, didn't work out. And then finally in 2014, which they now call the year of the Bible movie, there was some success again at the box office. There was also some big failure, by the way, but success, and it sort of reawakened the industry to, oh, yes, that values audience. That's right. We need to focus on them. And so now, without getting ahead of myself, I'll just say that there's a larger group of people who definitely understand the power of this audience, even if they still don't understand the audience, and understand that there's big opportunities here.
Yeah, super insightful. Thanks for kind of that overall kind of landscape picture here. So when you kind of made that transition from the political world, where did you kind of land in the film industry, and what are you doing? What's kind of giving you that insider perspective today?
Yeah, so a couple months ago, it's I guess more than a couple of months ago, I saw some of the things that were not being done that I felt were opportunities, and so decided through a lot of prayer to start my own company because, if a problem needs to get fixed, you got to go fix it.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I see in particular is that the reason I talk about values is because when people in this town hear faith, they automatically think the Bible, God's Not Dead, War Room, some of those very sort of faith explicit kind of films. Mm-hmm. But there's a much larger proposition, and in fact, in some sense, I think a better proposition, which are films like The Blind Side, or classic like Chariots of Fire, or 42, starring about Jackie Robinson, or Selma. And I had this hunch that there was this audience out there aligned around values, and so very recently did a survey for a company called VidAngel, which is an amazing home entertainment company that allows families to stream content the way that they want. In other words, taking out content that they object to.
Yeah. Amazing is, by the way, an understatement.
Yeah. Well, in fact,
incredible.
If we can get off on a side road for a second, just yesterday, my boys wanted to see 42 because they wanted to know the true story of Jackie Robinson. Yeah. And I had remembered when it came out that I didn't let them see it, and I couldn't remember why. And I looked back and I said, oh, it's got this and this and this and this and this in it. So I went on to VidAngel and I took out the stuff that we objected to, some of the stronger language and just a few other things. And we watched it together. And first of all, it was incredible. It was just an earth-shattering film. It had a huge impact on all of us. But secondly, we were able to watch it, whereas before we were not, because we were able to remove some of the stuff that we felt was too strong for our kids to be able to absorb at their ages.
Yeah.
And so that to me is an incredible, incredible gift that the guys that created that technology have given us.
Yeah, I want to get to that in just a little bit for sure.
But certainly, so Creed. There's so many other films that. I kind of look at them in two categories. War Room is kind of like a film that is for the church, and it's kind of to encourage the church and get the church, off their behinds, so to speak, and up and active. And I think for that purpose, it's good. The limiting factor of something like a War Room is that it doesn't really speak into the broader culture because it's sort of seen as a Bible thumping movie. And so if we're going to impact the culture in a positive way, the larger proposition is getting behind films like I've mentioned, like the Peanuts movie, that have a biblical worldview, fundamentally have a biblical worldview. And the more successful that those films are, the more people interact with that worldview. And to me, that ultimately is what it's all about.
Right. It's kind of like what C.S. Lewis said. We don't need more Christian books. We need more books written by Christians. I mean, it's kind of a similar parallel with the film industry, right? I mean, it's not that we necessarily need, we do need Christian films to inspire people in their faith and everything, and to be, stronger believers and just step out and take action and all those kinds of things like God's Not Dead. And these movies are so great at, but then there's also the Unbrokens and these other great films.
Yeah. And so we did this survey with National Research Group for VidAngel and discovered, and honestly, I was astounded because I thought the values audience was big, but the values audience is 52 million American adults ages 18 to 59. It's 1 out of every 3 moviegoers in the U.S. Wow. That's big.
Wow.
That's huge. And it is predominantly white, but it is actually less white than the general population. It is more Black and Hispanic than the general population. And surprisingly, to people that think that the values audience is a bunch of white folks from the South who eat Chick-fil-A and only watch the Kendrick Brothers and movies with Kevin Sorbo, it is more Democrat than Republican. So it's a very, very diverse group of folks, but they're all united and tends to be younger, more likely to be parents, more digitally savvy. But they're all united around this one thing, which is around they want to see positive, clean, uplifting entertainment for the whole family. And that is the fundamental difference. And that's a huge group of people. And so we'll have to get into that because, of course, with some of these projects that did not work like Ben-Hur, some in the media were claiming there just isn't a big enough audience. And my perspective is they just don't have enough faith in the audience.
Right. Interesting. Well, I do want to hear about VidAngel and can you just give us because I think what VidAngel is going to do, I don't know this for sure, but what they're seeing is because it allows people, and my wife found out about this just a couple weeks ago, and we watched 12 Years a Slave, and we won't watch rated R movies, but really wanted to see, a Best Picture and just such an important piece of understanding our history in America. So we really felt we needed to watch it, but just wanted to be able to watch it without all the profanity and everything. And that's what VidAngel allows you to do, is to actually turn off what, you buy the movie for $20 and then you can sell it back for $19. And then once you own it, because you own it, you can now edit the film however you want to watch it according to your own viewing pleasure or your own set of morals or whatever it is. And you can turn off certain profanity words. You can turn off all profanity words. You can turn off certain violence scenes that are not relevant or that they're not necessarily going to make or break the plot line. But then there are some scenes that may be kind of graphic that you need to see, and they'll tell you that. That's one of the amazing parts of it. So I just want to make sure people understand. So with that data, with those analytics, is the goal to then start to harvest that data to help really inform Hollywood that, look, people don't want to hear GD in the movies. People don't want to hear the F word over and over and over again.
Right. So you're right. So there's two sort of goals here. The first one is, in our survey, 82% of values audience parents say it's very important to know about explicit content before deciding if their child should watch something, right? And what's also interesting is almost 3/4 of the values audience say it's very important to know about explicit content before they themselves watch something, sort of what you just described, right? And so what VidAngel does is exactly that. And they say very irreverently, watch, films however the bleep you want, because that's they're trying to make the point that this is your own custom experience. And I found out about it from a pastor friend of mine and tried it out and was blown away. And unfortunately, they are being sued now by 3 of the major Hollywood studios led by Disney. The other 3 are not suing VidAngel. And I believe very strongly that VidAngel is going to prevail in that lawsuit because they built their technology on something called the Family Movie Act, which was passed in 2005. And the Family Movie Act explicitly states that you can do this, that families can filter this kind of content in the home. And the reason the Family Movie Act, just to back up a little bit, got passed in the first place is because there were a ton of other services like this that cropped up in the early 2000s and late 90s. And the studios kept squashing them legally and putting them out of business. Congress was outraged over this, particularly with one company called CleanFlix, because Congress felt that they should have tried to make it work. And the industry just didn't. And so Congress said, all right, if you are not going to play nice, we're going to compel you to play nice. We're going to pass the Family Movie Act, and you have to allow this. And as you can see, that despite that, they are still trying to shut them down in court. And we believe that they will be victorious for so many reasons. One is the Family Movie Act. The other is that, we live in an era of technology and customization. And those who try to hold back technology, and keep things the way they were, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work if you're the dictator of a country. If you look at, even in countries like Iran, where one of the things that's sort of undercutting the regime is mobile devices. Technology is just, it's a frontier that you can't put it away, so to speak. Innovation is the thing of the day. So VidAngel offers an incredible tool, particularly to consume entertainment that, as you pointed out, you otherwise might not be able to consume. But then it also underscores this need fundamentally for content that is positive, affirming, and uplifting, and it demonstrates clearly that is the kind of stuff that the audience wants anyway. Ted Barrett, Movie Guide, has done a lot of research around this notion that clean sells, that the content that actually performs the best at the box office, for example, is a PG or lower rating. And that, contrary to popular opinion, 50 Shades of Grey and other things like that actually don't make as much money.
Right. Interesting. So, gosh, it is such a powerful platform, and I'm really excited to see where VidAngel is going to take this data, because they're going to be able to show very clearly. I mean, this is not a matter of being prudish or something like that. This just makes good business sense to keep this in mind, that people, like, I don't want to take my wife on a date to go see a movie where there's going to be a naked woman or even a half naked woman in it, for example, or certainly take my kids where they're going to see a whole bunch of violence and or even a bunch of profanity. And so to be able to show that this makes good business sense, because it seems, I mean, where did they get this idea? I mean, why are they just now coming to terms with the fact that 1 out of 3 people in America are values? They're making these decisions according to their values of what movies they're going to watch.
Well, okay, to answer your second question first, the reason that that had never been decided yet is because nobody had really done the definitive research to determine that, which was sort of incredible to me. There have been different attempts. Barna did some research and they said, well, there's 67 million evangelicals in America. But the problem, the limiting factor with that research is it just identifies who they are. It doesn't identify what they do. So, in a political poll, if you say registered Republicans, for example, nobody takes that poll seriously because a registered Republican just means you're registered. Doesn't mean you're going to vote. Likely voters are the polls that people pay attention to because it's people that have said, look, I'm planning on voting, and these are the candidates that I'm looking at. And the values audience are your likely voters. They're the folks that go into the marketplace. In our survey, they had to have made an entertainment purchase in the last 6 months. So they're people that are actually buying stuff, and that's sort of around their motivation. The VidAngel story itself is really interesting. It was started by a couple of brothers. Neil Harmon, who's the CEO, has 7 kids, and just really wanted to make something for his own family because he has this movie he loves called Cinderella Man. It's a boxing movie, and he wanted to show it to his kids, but there was just stuff in it that he couldn't. And so out of necessity, they decided to figure out how to make this happen, and sort of the rest is history. And it's kind of remarkable because for a lot of us, there are just so many films that our kids could not see with us, and they now can. And we now have the discretion to decide what's in them and what's out of them, because it's not, a lot of your listeners may hear and go, oh, is it a custom rating? You can either choose something like, remove all profanity, or, for example, I was watching Patton, and there were certain words that I thought, it's a 4-letter word, but I do want particularly my oldest son to kind of have a flavor for who Patton really was. Mm-hmm. It's authentic to who he was. So I took out some of the more egregious words, but I left in some of the others, and I said, you're going to hear a little bit of saltiness there, son. That's kind of who the guy was.
Absolutely.
I don't want to sanitize it to the point where he grows up and the world shocks him. I kind of want to, ease him in a little bit. And VidAngel gives you the opportunity to do that, and it's a real game changer.
Yeah, I love, and you brought up a good point earlier about the way that VidAngel is not only trying to, or they're not only allowing us to be able to filter certain content out of the movie, but that they also have that score for each movie. I guess they call it the inspiring score, where there's so many movies that are coming out that are just so dark, and there's no redemption from the darkness. It's just dark, and it just brings you into this like black hole of depression by the time you walk out of there. And so I love what they're doing to really raise this standard and help these companies to aim for movies that are inspiring. They're actually uplifting. Like, for example, Patton, incredibly inspiring man, but there's going to be some war in the midst of that. There's going to be some profanity in the midst of that. So it's not necessarily about getting rid of all of the offensive content, but some of that is just necessary for telling this story of redemption, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's actually a pastor in Florida who started a campaign called Save Filtering. You can go check it out at savefiltering.com. And I don't know what this, 7 kids. Here's another 7-kid family, biblical number here. But he also has 7 kids. And VidAngel is so important to them that they started this campaign because they just think they have a ministry called Family Goals, which is all about helping families be excellent. And he's a former NFL linebacker, played for the Jaguars, named Brian Schwartz. And his wife, Diane, is a former highly ranked NCAA volleyball player. And they apply the lessons of sports to raising excellent families. And one of the things that's important to them in Family Goals is there's certain films that reinforce something they're trying to teach or talk about a certain value, but the film is a better way to do it. And VidAngel empowers them to be able to do that. And so they think it's so important to preserve filtering in general, whether it be on VidAngel or another platform that might come up, that they've started this campaign to get American families together and say, hey, let's make some noise and save filtering.
Yeah. Well, definitely go sign that petition, and certainly go and support VidAngel, or download the app and watch a movie right away. I mean, just to get that experience, it'll change your life in the way that you watch movies, for sure. So I want to talk a little bit more about kind of the overall film industry and the way, particularly for the faith in film aspect of it. So how do these companies determine what movie they're, let's say that I'm a screenwriter and I want to know what do these companies look for? What are they wanting in order to reach that third of the population that is the values audience? I mean, what are the types? I mean, is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it, what are the genres? What are they really going after right now?
Okay, well, let me just first back up and say that for all your readers, there's a special edition out right now, and you can still see it online. The print edition was last Wednesday, but there's a special edition of the Washington Times called Faith and Film. And again, if you just go on if you Google like Washington Times Faith and Film, they put it all online. It's quite beautiful. And it has it's got a lot of essays, a big diversity of opinion, ranging from producer Devon Franklin to Jerry Johnson, founder of, current president, sorry, not founder, of National Religious Broadcasters, Dallas Jenkins, who made an amazing film I want to talk about just for a second called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, Amy McGee from Gather, Vincent Walsh from The Young Messiah, just a lot of different voices, and it's a wonderful thing to read. It really is, and just people coming from sort of all angles in the space. As to how this kind of stuff gets made, the general process is there are production companies that and many of them that sort of act as feeders for these different scripts, and it depends. It's all over the map. So there's the traditional, sort of established Hollywood production company gets hold of a script, and that script gets sold to a distributor, which is typically one of the big studios, and they go through that traditional distribution. Then there are folks, we were joking earlier about Sherwood Baptist, but they actually have created all their own content, out of their church. Again, they did go through a traditional distributor, Sony. But and then there's sort of this third way that's emerging where I'd say third or fourth or fifth way, because distribution is changing so dramatically. There are different options. Fathom is a company that does events. They do these special events. So a lot of your listeners may have seen the Dropbox last year as an example. That was a Fathom event, special one-night event. And that's a great way to go for some folks. There's a platform called Congregate, which is powered by Gather, theatrical on demand, where you can actually take a film. Last year there was a film called Beyond the Mask. I don't know if you remember it, Darren, but it was actually a Christian action movie set in colonial America. And
yeah,
do you remember it?
About that. I didn't actually see it.
Okay, it was great. I mean, it was totally great. Nothing objectionable in it whatsoever. It was a fun ride, and that was actually distributed on Gather. And Gather is essentially where you pre-book these theaters, and if the it's crowdsourced distribution, where if the crowd says, yes, we want to see this movie, and you get enough people in enough cities, you can actually have book 50 theaters or 500 theaters, just depending on how many people want to go. So there's never been a better time to get involved, because there's never been more opportunities. If you have content and you want to get it out there, there's so many ways to do it. And so speaking of, just as an example, speaking of films coming out of churches, there's a guy named Dallas Jenkins out of Harvest Bible Chapel in Chicago, and they created this film called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. It's a Christian comedy, faith-based comedy. Now, when have you ever heard that said in the same sentence.
Never.
Right? Because the perception of us is that we are all Ned Flanders and we're perfect and we have no sense of humor, right?
I think Mark Lowry is about as close as we've gotten.
Yes, and it's a romantic comedy. It's hilarious, and yet it's very faithful at the same time. It's essentially the story of this Hollywood bad boy who was a child star. He gets into all kinds of, and I'm going to say this without giving any spoilers, he gets into all kinds of trouble, wrecks a hotel room, has to do community service, and his community service ends him up in a mega church. And he's cleaning the bathrooms, and he sees that they're putting on this passion play, and he says to the pastor, well, hey, I'm a fabulous actor, so might I try out for the play? And the pastor says, well, sure, but you have to be a Christian. And he says, well, I am one. I am a Christian. And so he essentially has to fake being a Christian for this film to get into the play. And it's just the faking being a Christian is, for anybody that's ever been to church, it's hysterical, because you realize all the things that we do that to somebody who is not a church person, are just kind of funny.
Right.
And so, but I also think the reason Gavin Stone is so important is it's a representation that these kind of films are getting more diverse, more fun, more interesting, and that the industry is open to all kinds of content, as long as it makes money.
Right.
And I don't think people should feel cynical about that because, look, I think that we will these kind of films will continue to make a lot of money, and fine, let that be the reason that people make them. We live in a market economy. If it sells, that's a good enough reason for me.
Yeah. And certainly, there, for example, PureFlix, I was talking with Steve Fedesky, who's their chief operations officer, and he was saying that, they really go after stories that are, that are true. They're looking for true stories, particularly, for example, Hillsong. This movie is about to come out this month, and so there's a powerful story there, but there's also a very large following. So, I think their recipe is they kind of put those two together, a true, powerful story with an already established audience, and bam, and I think, and he said that they're about to do one on, well, I don't know if I can talk about that, but that's kind of what they're looking for. So I'm sure that the different studios kind of have their own, kind of approach, their own type of things that they're looking for. Who did you say is this church in Chicago that's making this comedy?
Yeah, Harvest Bible Chapel Vertical Church Films made The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, and that's
James McDonald's church, right?
There are, by the way, just a bunch of you just hit on something. You talked about Darren books, so Same Kind of Different as Me, which was a very, very popular book in Christian circles, is coming out next year as a Paramount film starring Renee Zellweger and Greg Kinnear. As you mentioned, Hillsong. There's actually more content, by the way. I did moderated a panel at Variety's Purpose Summit about a month ago, and there's actually more content in this space than at any time that I can remember. So Mel Gibson's back with an incredible film from Lionsgate called Hacksaw Ridge, which is the true story of a conscientious objector in World War II who joins the Army and ends up being awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. Incredible, and all driven by his faith.
Wow.
Disney has a film coming out called Queen of Catway, and which is the true story of a girl who is from the slums of Katwe, Uganda, probably the poorest of the poorest place on earth, goes to a Christian missionary chess camp, becomes a prodigy, and becomes a internationally ranked chess champion. And that's got David Oyelowo and Lupita Nyong'o, who's in she's in everything lately. So there is so much wonderful content out there for folks to take a look at, both kind of, again, with explicit faith stories, and then there's some other ones that are just really fun. Universal has one coming out called A Dog's Purpose, which is just a heartwarming movie, the kind of movie that they don't really make anymore. STX has a film coming out called The Space Between Us about the value of one life and how every life has purpose. And again, these are just films that people need to get out and support because their message is fundamentally good and valuable.
Powerful. Well, Matthew, we went a little longer on this episode than we normally do. And I think a lot of that is this is just such a fascinating conversation and certainly an area that I think a lot of Christians have been intrigued by and maybe some kind of on the fringe is kind of skeptical about. But I think what you've done for us today is made us more optimistic. Certainly you have for me, just more excited, more optimistic about what God is doing in film and more hopeful about the opportunities that are there. So I'm going to link up to your to this special piece that you were involved with in the Washington Times, and certainly link to Inspire Buzz, where people can see a little bit more about what you're doing and just really view you're a pioneer, man. And thanks for what you're doing out there. I know there have been others that have come before that you're standing on their shoulders as well. But thanks for the work that you're doing, brother.
Yeah, Darren. And just to leave you, if your listeners go to facebook.com/Inspire Buzz, we post on this stuff like 7, 8, 9 times a day. So lest you think there is not a lot going on, we're constantly putting content up there to make people aware of all the stuff that's out there. So that's facebook.com/Inspire Buzz.
Awesome. And I know if they go to inspire.buzz, they can link up to your Twitter, to your Facebook, to all of your social media channels as well. So, Matthew, thanks again for being so generous with your time, for sharing your expertise. May God continue to bless everything you're doing in this critical industry.
All righty. God bless you too, Darren. And thank you for doing this show.
Hope you've enjoyed today's episode with Matthew, and I would love to hear your feedback about it at theologyofbusiness.com, where you can get that faith and film resource that Matthew put together for the Washington Times. It is an incredible resource. You can also get more information about marketplace ministry, spiritual gifts in the marketplace, marketing like Jesus, and Christ-centered leadership and entrepreneurship. And as a reminder, be sure to check out fwsummit.org for more information about the upcoming Faith at Work Summit on October the 27th through the 29th in Dallas, Texas. And be sure to let me know through theologyofbusiness.com or on social media if you're planning to come. Thanks for listening, and keep partnering with God in your business.